Hi, fourth graders. It's me, Mrs. Strom. Last week we were creating a loom to create our weaving inspired by a Persian carpet. So this is what mine looks like. We just used a piece of cardboard and wrapped it with some yarn to start off with. I'm going to show you how to do the rest of the weaving today. You're going to need this. Hopefully you saved that. You're going to need some weaving materials like yarn. But if you don't have yarn, you can use things like I said last week. You could even use a plastic bag that you cut up into strips. So here's a plastic bag that I cut up into strips, and I even tied it together to make it longer. You can even use paper. I'm going to use some of this leftover wrapping paper. You can use ribbons. Here's a ribbon from a present from the holidays. I'm going to show you how you can use this too. You can use almost anything that to weave. So I will show you how to do that. All right. So here's my loom. When you're starting to weave with yarn, especially, you're going to do a pattern of going under, over, under, over, under, over, under. Okay, that's the basic pattern. These strings that go vertically are called warp strings. The strings that go across horizontally are called weft strings. The way that I think about it is the weft goes right and left. The weft goes right and left. That rhymes, so it helps me remember it. And the warp is what you travel through. So that's kind of like a time warp. Get it? All right, so you're just gonna use, if you're gonna use yarn, that's all you have to do is just go under, over like that for your first string. And then with one end, and then the other end, you have to do the opposite. So it's an alternating pattern. So this one I went under, over. This one, now I'm going to go over, then under, over, then under, over, then under, and over. And then I have this big loop over here. So I have to pull through like that. I don't want to pull too hard, just gently, and just kind of slide it up there. You can use your fingers to comb it up. Weavers actually have special tools that they use to comb up. But for us, we can just use our fingers like this. Sticking with the long end, now that I'm over here on this side, I'm going to go under, over, under, over, under like that. Pull. And then I go over, under, over, under, over, under, pull. Oh, so I ended over, so then I start by going under. So it's kind of like it's wrapping around that last string before I weave through the warp again. All right. So far so good. It looks pretty good. I have this string, this end still left over. What I'm going to do, it's not long enough to really weave through, but I'm going to weave through just a little bit. And then this part, I'm just going to wrap it around the last warp string that it did go through. I'm going to wrap it around a couple times, and then I'm just going to leave it. Okay. Then you get some more yarn, and you just continue how you started. So you can continue where this ended. So I could start here and then continue on, or I could start on this end and then continue, or start on this end or continue. It doesn't really matter. All right, so if you don't have yarn, remember I said you could use other materials. So I'm gonna switch over to using paper. Paper is pretty similar, except I won't be able to wrap it around. So it's just gonna have the ends sticking out on the sides right here. That's okay. Let's see where I was. So this went over, under, over, under, over, under, like that. And then here's another one. And this one is going to go opposite, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. This one is kind of long, so I could cut this. I don't think it's going to be long enough to fill this in, so I'll just leave that. If you are cutting off anything on the sides, don't cut anything shorter than the width of the board. So I can cut this part off. If you want, you can wait until you're completely done with your weaving before you cut anything off. All right, so here is my plastic bag. This one went under, so now this one goes over, then under, over, then under, over, then under. Remember, it's an alternating pattern. This one is kind of long, so I can actually use this to wrap it around. So if this one was under, if this one is over this warp string, then with the long end, I'm just going to go under, then over, under, then over, under, then over, then under. Pull it through. Remember, don't pull too hard. If this is under, then I have to go over, under, over, under. All right, so I'm just going to continue doing this. You can see that there's some yarn showing through. If you don't want that to show through, then you just have to push this together. I know it shrinks it together, but it actually makes the weaving stronger when you do that. And that's why in those Persian rugs, or even with any kind of weaving, you rarely see the vertical lines of a weaving. You mostly see the weft, the horizontal weft strings, not the warp strings. All right, so I'm going to fast forward through this next part and show you what it's going to look like when I'm all done. All right. Okay, so now that I am done, I'm just going to clean up some of my weaving to make it a little bit neater. If you have some glue or tape, this will be helpful. So some of these parts right here, I can fold it over and I can tape it, or I can glue it. If you're using tape, make sure that it looks nice and neat. The parts that are over, you can just curl it and fold it underneath like that so it doesn't show. Anything that might be hanging out in the middle that you don't like so much, you can cut those away, but just be very careful you're not cutting any of the warp string. Right. So I'm going to fast forward through this next part. If you have leftover string like this, what I usually do with the string is just wrap it back in and then kind of loop it under the weaving, and you can hide it by just tucking it under the weaving like this. So I just weave it under and then just tuck it under so you can't see it. And then that's it. So you can use some coloring materials like crayons, markers, or paint, and you can add details around the sides to make it really beautiful. Like, I think I'm going to do some spirals like this. With Persian carpets and in weaving, symmetry is usually what's prized after. So try to make it symmetrical where this side matches this side. So you see how on this, the curve faces in this way. So I try to make the curve face this way. I forgot to show you how to take this and make it into a ribbon that you can weave with. So if you have something like this, usually there's a sticky part on the back. Just peel that part off. And there's a staple. The staple is a little bit tricky to remove, so you might need some adult help with this. But if you have a staple remover, that's easy. You just clip it and then pull it apart. I don't have a staple remover, so I have to do it by hand or use some tools. So what I noticed that on the inside is that that's where the ends of the staple are. So I'm going to use these scissors to kind of pry it open. So I just put this underneath that very carefully, and then I just pull it out. Remember to use, be very careful. So if you're doing this, make sure you have parent supervision, okay? And then when you take the staple out, it all unravels into a really, really, really long piece of ribbon. So this is actually really good to use for weaving. And that's what I use for the center part right here. All right, so I used a combination of yarn, paper, and ribbon, and even plastic bags. All right, so I hope you had fun making this, and I will see you next time. Bye.